Good afternoon and welcome to the December 10th Emergency Advisory Committee meeting. Recognize that we're having this meeting on Treaty 6 territory, which is the territory of the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, the Blackfoot, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as one of the great homelands of the Métis Nation. I will roll call now to establish attendance, starting with Councillor Nicol.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Walters.
Present.
Live and on deck. Councillor Banga.
Present.
Yes, for Banga. Councillor Cartmel.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Katarina.
Yes.
Hello. Thank you. Councillor Zadig.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Essinger.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Yep, still here.
Thank you. Councillor Knack.
Good afternoon. Did you not leave,
Did you
Ben?
never go anywhere, Ben? Did you just stay on the thing all night? Burn in the midnight government. Councillor McKean.
Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That's everybody. So need a motion to adopt the agenda with just the one item 3.1 on it. Councillor Essinger.
Oh, sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Don't need a second or a committee, but thanks.
I was just testing you. Good job.
And a few procedural tests today at a different meeting. Please vote on the adoption of the agenda.
Yes. Zadig.
Yes. Walters.
I am definitely in the wrong meeting.
I'm also a yes.
Oh boy. I'm a yes as well.
And Councillor Cartmel, please.
Yes.
All right. That's the agenda. The minutes from November 27th. Councillor Knack.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move the adoption of the minutes from the November 27th, 2020 Emergency Advisory Committee meeting.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns, errors, or omissions with the minutes? Not seeing any. Please vote.
Yes.
And your vote, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. We have all the votes.
Display the vote, please. Carried. Protocol items. We don't have any formally, but this might be the last opportunity for a while just to again recognize the folks in the healthcare system, some of whom we were privileged to hear from the other day, who are doing extraordinary work under very challenging circumstances. And even with the stronger measures, it's likely that those circumstances will become more dire before they get better because of the lag effects of COVID. So, so our thoughts go out to the folks on the front lines, the support workers, the nurses, the doctors, the EMS personnel, and firefighters and police officers who are also responding to some of these calls as well from the municipal family. So just our thoughts are with those folks and their families right now. Okay, so we need to select items for debate. There's only the one, so we'll select that. There is, and this is now unusual for us because we've never had this question before us before, but we do have requests to speak, which we have two, in fact, and so we have not heard from speakers at EAC before. It is technically a standing committee of council, so requests to speak can be made, but I would look for some guidance from the Assembly about whether you wish to begin to hear from speakers on these emergency management matters, or keep these meetings separate from the other policy-making committees where we tend to hear from speakers more regularly. So, Councillor Paquette?
Yeah, my feeling is that these are unusual times, and it looks like we have some medical professionals who would like to share their information with us, which would actually help inform our decision making and also inform just generally what we know, as we are not experts and we have experts ready to share their knowledge with us. So I'm open to hearing them. In fact, I would move that we add speakers.
Okay, Councillor Paquette has moved that we hear from the two speakers. They are Maria Infante from Zero COVID Canada and Malgorzata Gasparowicz from Zero COVID Canada. Thank you. Councillor Hamilton?
Okay, so one of my points was going to be a point of privilege because I did not have the speakers list in front of me, but that helps. I bless this, I think everyone has good intentions, but the point of this committee is to hear advice from our emergency advisors with respect to potential emergency before us. I would argue that opening it up to speakers from the public will dilute part of that advice that we need, and we need it to be really pointed advice from our administration and from their emergency advisors. And I don't want to get into a battle of the experts on this. This is not the time nor the place to hear and I don't know what the speakers are going to say, but I am concerned that this would open the door to battling experts, and that is not what we need at this committee. So I respect that people want to speak to this issue, but I don't think it's appropriate at this committee. I think it would be more appropriate if we had a bylaw or information coming forward that was specific. But given that that this tends to be a general update and we don't make legislative decisions at this committee, that gets referred to council or another committee, I would respectfully say that it's not appropriate at this time. And if administration feels that these experts are worth hearing to, they should add them to their panel of advice from our administration.
Thank you. Councillor Banga? Councillor Banga?
Sorry. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Hamilton's statement completely. Yeah, this shouldn't be a public hearing. I mean, otherwise we would have the same thing. All those emergency advisory committees will be hours and hours long. Sure, these guys are experts, and we do get there are some of experts' reports through emails and other media stuff. And to me, they're more than welcome to send us their presentations. And I think, again, this time is for us to hear from our administration about what they're suggesting, and then also what the other levels of the government are doing. So again, I don't think we should open it up to speakers at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walters?
So just briefly, I don't need to repeat what Councillor Banga said. I agree with him and Councillor Hamilton's articulation. So I don't think this, for those very reasons, I don't think it's wise for us to open this committee up to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just chip in here and say that where we have reports that folks have read ahead of time and might provide comments on it makes sense to have non-statutory public hearings and general commentary at committees, and that generally adds value, particularly where there's a focused discussion on a particular policy question, as Councillor Hamilton put it. This is not a policy-making committee other than the question of whether to enact a state of local emergency, and our other general purpose is to hear advice from administration and ask questions to provide oversight to management of emergency situations, state of local emergency or not. And so I think, quite frankly, it muddies the waters considerably to have members of the public begin to offer perspectives on that in this setting, and could represent, to the extent that if we create an expectation, people are going to be invited to speak at this committee, that could impact the timeliness of decision-making for us under emergency situations. And so I just do not think that, as with council, there should be an expectation that we're hearing from the public at this committee. If it makes sense, either from an administrative perspective or as the other day when we brought the doctors forward as a delegation to present, to bring a delegation in to present on a focused point, then I think that's that should still be available as part of an agenda item with a delegation attached to it. And then with the approval of the agenda, we might hear from external resources, but in a structured way. And so my invitation to the two folks who would like to share information with council, not even having seen what Mr. Laughlin is going to say to us in a few minutes, that my invitation would very much be to them to share their comments with us by way of council correspondence. And then we could evaluate whether it makes sense to include them in a further conversation based on what they have to offer. I led to believe from Councillor Paquette's comments that they're subject matter experts. I don't know that. But I'd be happy to receive correspondence from the two folks, and then council could evaluate that with the benefit of some of that foreknowledge. So I will not be supporting hearing from speakers at this committee ever, unless there is a really extraordinary circumstance. And to me, there's no extraordinary circumstance at this time today. So those are my 2 cents. Councillor Knack?
I'll actually just say I completely agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I'm generally a full supporter of hearing from the public as much as possible. EAC meetings are very particular, so I want to make sure, as you already extended that offer, that they reach out to us and share their correspondence directly, but we need to use these committee meetings effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette?
Yep, so I think we can hear the will of council pretty clearly. I suppose maybe in lieu of hearing from the speakers today, we can request that they send their information through email. Maybe even create a video, much in the same vein as they would have if they were presenting to us today, so that we could review that and maybe even connect with administration to see if there's some point in the future which it would make sense to present to us specific and specified knowledge. And with that in mind, clearly hearing the will of council, I'm happy to withdraw my motion.
Any objection to the withdrawal of the motion? Not hearing any. Then again, with an invitation to Maria and Malgorzata to write to us via city.clerk@edmonton.ca, and that will be shared with all members of council, and we can follow up individually and take next steps from there. So thank you. Okay, let's, there's no time specific other than the only item on the agenda, which is up next. So let's go straight into that. Mr. Laughlin, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of committee. Good afternoon. Joining virtually is the members of the executive leadership team. Jennifer Kluth, the chair of our COVID-19 task team, Ms. Andrejchuk, our city solicitor, and Dr. Chris Sikora, the chief medical officer of health for the Edmonton zone. The new provincial restrictions dominate our updates this week with the exponential rise of transmission in the city and the real prospect of significant pressure on our health system in the weeks and months ahead. The province of Alberta ramped up its restrictions to prohibit social gatherings outside the household. The restrictions are dramatic, broad-ranging, and will force Edmontonians to celebrate the holiday season in non-traditional ways. They have significant impact on some city services and processes that we'll discuss shortly. Temporary pandemic accommodation for those experiencing homelessness is in operation, and we'll have a brief update on the current operating challenges associated with that. Shared this on Tuesday. Data from the Edmonton zone continues to be alarming. The path we are on is dangerous, and the increase in pain, suffering, and tragedy that we face is exponential. Even if the growth of active case levels out or decreases in the short term, the strain on our health system will continue to be a burden for some time. It feels as if we're in the eye of the storm, and that means that there is more damage and harm on the horizon. The weeks ahead will be rough, with surging hospitalizations, ICU admissions, and the trend in outbreak locations is telling. AHS is reporting significant increases in acute care, long-term care, and extended care facilities. There have been some minor but notable increases in correctional facilities in the region as well. But with rising community transmission, we should expect to see infection rates climb in the Edmonton zone. The imminent arrival of the vaccine in the province is welcome news and gives real hope for an end to the pandemic. But it would be a tragic mistake to ease off on public health rules at this fragile time. As we progress through the holiday season, the city's communications challenge will be to find the right balance between restricting social gathering behaviors now while offering hope for COVID-free life sometime in 2021. With respect to the pandemic accommodations, currently there are 932 24/7 beds in the system. Today there are approximately 100 shelter beds available in the system as staffing shortages and outbreak response measures have restricted capacity. Alberta Health Services, a list of individuals who do not have a fixed address that are COVID-19 positive and their close contacts has doubled in the past 2 weeks. Not all of the individuals on the list access the shelter system, but this data highlights the growing need for support for vulnerable Edmontonians. The city and its partners at the province and Homeward Trust are developing a system-wide governance and planning approach to the pandemic shelter needs. The focus is on strategies for space expansion and staffing. The city will continue to play a supporting role in activating a cohesive, more efficient system. The Edmonton Convention Center capacity remains at 150, but we're hoping that capacity will be ramping up as agency staff return from being in isolation. We expect it to reach the 300, which is the full capacity, the week of December 14th. A number of security changes and communication enhancements have been introduced recently, including a client code of conduct and formalized rules. There is better integration between ECC security and the operating agencies on site, and with these measures in place, we have seen fewer security incidents. Commonwealth Stadium has been running at 60 to 70% capacity for the week due to warm weather. Some staff have been impacted by the virus, which has put pressure on staffing levels. The Mustard Seed temporary shelter is operating at full capacity, 80. Their permit application was approved by the SDAB, allowing the shelter to operate for the 2020-2021 winter period. Municipal enforcement officers and peace officers have been actively monitoring and enforcing business restrictions and compliance with the face covering bylaw and social gathering restrictions. With their expanded authority, city peace officers will be closely coordinating with other regulatory agencies in the enforcement of the new restrictions starting Monday. In practical terms, that means we should expect to see increased numbers of enforcement warnings and tickets issued over the coming weeks. 28 tickets were issued between December 3rd and 9th, with 371 warnings issued during that same period. We'll cover enforcement and compliance with a few slides later on. The provincial government restrictions are effective for 4 weeks, with gathering and mask orders effective immediately, and all other restrictions effective Sunday, December 13th. The first 4 restrictions shown here have the potential implications for our peace officers and enforcement actions. Expectations for indoor-outdoor gatherings, including wedding and funeral services, remain the same, and I'll speak to the city's adoption of working from home restrictions later in the presentation. The provincial government closures are effective December 13th for 4 weeks. City recreation facilities are closed until restrictions are lifted by the province. However, we are continuing to offer virtual programming. We have, as the executive leadership team, taken steps to close the rec facilities earlier than December 13th and working through steps to action that. In our River Valley parks and outdoor amenities, indoor amenity buildings will be closed, but washrooms will remain open. Outdoor registered programs and equipment rentals are postponed. Senior centers and facilities operated by the city and by partners like the Orange Hub and soccer centers are closed to the public. The entertainment, restaurant, bars, pubs, and personal wellness restrictions will impact the scope of monitoring done by our peace officers. Although not directly impacted by the restrictions, our transit service will be affected by the reduced mobility of Edmontonians. Some service adjustments may be required in response to the drop in ridership. However, we'll balance that with the commitment to deliver a safe, essential service to customers. We may need to maintain full service levels to maintain social distancing requirements. Uber and other rideshare services will continue to follow the province's existing guidelines. I mentioned enforcement and a few locations highlighted. Candy Cane Lane will operate as a 2-way drive-through event with parking banned each evening from 5 p.m. to midnight. Candy Cane Lane ambassadors will inform visitors that sidewalks are closed, and will rely on Edmontonians to comply with the sidewalk closures. If we see gatherings forming on the sidewalks, we will ask our peace officers, the public safety compliance team, to step in. In terms of dog parks, city enforcement officers are patrolling and responding to complaints as they come in. We're enforcing for all outdoor public social gatherings and face coverings. For ice rinks, we're adding staff to manage overcrowding at the Oval and other River Valley areas by managing the parking lots. And if we see overloading, we'll be shutting down the parking lots when the amenity is full. We haven't finalized our approach to the zoo public access yet, but we are leaning towards keeping it open and restricting attendance to household members only. We'll have to restrict it to household members only, but we need to do an adjustment on the basis of tickets that have already been purchased. Access is currently limited with time ticketing, and that will continue. We still need to work through some of the operational issues and obtain more clarity from the province before we land on our final approach. We understand that some Edmontonians are starved for activities and are questioning what is allowable behavior. Our best advice to Edmontonians is to respect the spirit and the details of the provincial guidelines. Physical distancing remains the key. We encourage Edmontonians not to look for loopholes. The province announced that effective December 13th, working from home is mandatory unless employers require a physical presence for operational effectiveness. In March, the city implemented a temporary work from home arrangement to protect employees and the public from the spread of COVID-19. The city is well positioned to further implement the province's new mandatory requirement. The city has always been a strong supporter of working from home as a public health measure. Since March, business areas have been given discretion and flexibility in determining the number of employees working at a City of Edmonton location, as long as occupancy capacities have been maintained and safe measures are followed. This new mandatory measure limits discretion and obliges the city to adhere strictly to the provincial order. We will be applying a GBA plus lens, being respectful of the mental health reasons some people may need to work away from home. Although we understand that barriers and risks exist, we are encouraging leaders to actively pursue the supports available to them. The restrictions are our new reality for the next 4 weeks, but it's important to note that they do not define us. It's easy to focus on what we've given up and the compromises we've made because it supports the general pandemic narrative. But the real story is that Edmonton continues to be an interesting and welcoming place to live, with people who are resourceful, caring, and have tremendous community spirit. We have so much to be grateful for and so many opportunities to celebrate the holidays and the winter season. The months ahead will be challenging, and it will challenge us to do things differently and safely. But in true Edmonton spirit, that's just a minor inconvenience. Administration has an important role to play ensuring the positive, hopeful messages are resonating along with the cautionary, prescriptive ones. It will take many months before most Edmontonians are immunized, and while we wait, we need to balance actions and expectations. To assist with this, we'll continue to use Edmonton.ca as a trusted resource for information and inspiration. Similarly, we play an important role helping small and medium enterprises capitalize on opportunities to respond and strengthen their businesses while complying with regulations. It's another balance we manage through ongoing outreach, and it's an investment in a healthy post-COVID local economy. In a week that's been focused on what not to do, I want to leave with the committee with reassurance that the city is building hope, resilience into our actions. Where we can, let's support local businesses. Let's do random acts of kindness, and let's all do this safely. And thank you, and ready to take any questions that you have.
Well said, Adam. Thank you. Questions? Councillor McKean.
Thank you. Is Dr. Sikora on the line?
Yeah, I am here.
Doctor, first of all, thanks a lot for providing the data that you did around urgent demand trends for addiction and mental health services. I don't know how to characterize them. I don't want to make them out to be worse than they are, but crisis encounters, the last table you provided, which seems to maybe capture a broader group than just people with opioid use disorders. So 1847 in the third quarter of 2019, and it's been climbing significantly ever since. Can you put those into any sort of perspective? Is it something to be quite concerned about?
I think our growing trends over the past year around mental health services and really the need to deliver more mental health services over the Edmonton zone is particularly concerning. So we have had a large disruption in what our normal society is, and that's resulted in more disruption to our households and more disruption to our lives. So the crisis encounters, and as defined as our unscheduled interactions with clients requiring immediate support related to mental health and or addiction concerns, are community-based, community-oriented, and that does represent a trend, the general trend in our mental health community to be more community-focused. But we are seeing much more of these types of crisis encounters, especially over the 2020 year.
And then we have opioid overdose or poisoning deaths doubling from quarter 3 in 2019-22 to quarter 2 now. My question I want to ask is, what can we do? And we just went through a very difficult budget, so I don't mean, what can the city spend money on to deal with this issue, but in a broad community sense, are there things that neighbors and neighborhoods and citizens can do for each other around these issues of mental health and even overdose deaths? Any thoughts?
A few thoughts generally, and I'm sorry I'm getting a fair bit of feedback. So we have noticed this, you're correct, it is a doubling in opiate overdose, unintentional opiate poisoning deaths over the past year. Now, what we can do as a society is try to address those baseline social determinants of health. And these are things that we have chatted with council numerous times over the past.
Sorry, Dr. Sikora, we're having a little trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry.
That's better.
A little bit better.
Yes, thank you.
So some of the things that we've chatted about over the past number of years as the opiate overdose pandemic itself has evolved is how do we as a society, as a city, as a health system, as an infrastructure actually help address these, and taking a preventive approach, taking a treatment approach, taking a harm reduction approach, and taking that enforcement approach for all important aspects of an appropriate response. So definitely things within our justice department and our police sector there are components there. Addressing and helping prevent some of those early childhood trauma events is an important aspect of this as well, giving people access to treatment. Taking a harm reduction approach throughout our infrastructures, again, are very important things to be able to help address the overdoses and drug addiction overall. And certainly work that's being done around a housing first strategy is a way that can help. Just a lot of this does take time. It takes energy, takes effort, it does take kindness, takes compassion. And it takes looking at things in a very holistic and compassionate view.
Dr. Sikora, I'm out of time, but again, I wanted to thank you for providing that data. It's maybe the wrong word to call it sobering, but it is very alarming to see those numbers.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few questions, first related to the education. So I know obviously we have our enforcement officers who are going out. I do still get a lot of questions from folks related to how we're working, both as a city individually, but then together with the province around education on things like wearing of masks and how to appropriately wear masks, proper hand hygiene before you put on and take off a mask. Are we sort of relying on them to primarily take that lead? Are we thinking about, and maybe we are, but are we doing like digital ads? Are we doing marketing on radio stations, TV broadcasts? I just don't know because I don't have access to many of those sources beyond the digital side. So,
well, I'll ask either Jen or Katrin to add to this, but I would say that our peace officers wouldn't sort of do that general education. They would do the specific education. They would do the general education. You have to wear a mask, 2 meter physical distancing, but more specifics, they just wouldn't have the space and time to do that. So on the what else are we doing, it looks like Katrin's got some comments.
Yeah, I'm happy to fill in a little bit there. Picking up on a council initiative called Hello, How Are You?, which is on urban isolation and mental health. we are collaborating with our colleagues in citizen services and those working on the Community Mental Health Action Plan and the Edmonton Public Library to create a series of short videos that are dubbed Random Acts of Connection. And they'll cover a range of topics in an attempt to be a little beacon of hope during dark times. Obviously, they can only do so much, but we have been collaborating to send some white light out into the world. Those start just before Christmas.
Well, that's great to know, and not to be the depressing one, but what about the reverse? We are going into a time of pretty significant restrictions, and how are we working to make sure people clearly understand that, or are we sort of just primarily relying on the province to be very clear about we need to take these actions in order to get ahead of everything? So are we being a little bit of the bad guy at times too, or are we sort of relying on the province for advertising related to that?
We are doing largely social media advertising, which you would be familiar with, that endeavors to be crystal clear about the rules and how they are to be interpreted in Edmonton and in the region. And we've been collaborating with our regional colleagues to ensure symmetry and consistency in that messaging.
But Councillor Knack, 2 weeks ago, I had a strong encouragement through Mr. Aiken to up our enforcement as it relates to the orders and the mask bylaw, and that's happening.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been getting still a lot of questions from folks saying, they're seeing, and it's hard to manage that across the board, but if we were wanting to make sure we were being very clear about that too, recognizing it's not a pleasant place to be, but we need to do it. So speaking of enforcement, the other question that I've got a lot recently is around how that's going to be managed around spots like malls, which I know will have restrictions, but how are we helping or not, or how are the malls going to be required to ensure that they aren't seeing more than 15% capacity in those malls when there are many access points to a lot of those malls?
I think Rob mentioned this today, that with, I guess, the more restrictive conditions, it actually helps our peace officers in being able to enforce. So if they do have additional capacity, we will be taking that step within the malls. I think we're still trying to understand the resource allocations as it relates to this, Councillor Knack. But it would again start with making sure that certainly the big malls are clear in terms of the restrictions, and then where we can, upping the enforcement, and that's integrated with EPS, with our peace officers, and with the Alberta health officers as well.
Okay, great. I have a few more questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
If I may add, sorry to interrupt, there's also a seasonally specific campaign underway on social media to ensure that people are clear about the restrictions for safe gatherings.
Great. I'm out of time. I'll have a few more questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, I'm curious to know with again the prescription on people being close together outdoors as well as indoors now. That obviously a lot of people I know have been going out for walks and things like that as a means of getting outdoors and getting exercise, and to a certain extent I suppose socializing. But we had put a whole bunch of infrastructure in place over the summer to allow people to sort of be out on our pathways and things safely and distance from each other. And we've dismantled a lot of that because of winter. And I'm just wondering if there's any thought of putting some of that back. I know some of it probably is problematic in terms of snow clearing and things like that, but I'm wondering if there's other parts of it that we could put back up quickly to allow people. There's certainly some areas where there's a lot of people out walking. I suspect that will be more, not less now. And I'm wondering if there's things we can do to facilitate that, to be able to let it happen within the rules.
Understood, Councillor Henderson. I honestly, I don't know if we've had the time to assess that yet.
It's a question, I realize that. I just thought I should raise it as a question, because I'm wondering if there's some areas we could put back in place fairly quickly and fairly informally.
Yeah, I'll check I'll check with Jen to see if that's been a discussion topic yet at the task team.
Great, thanks. And then the other question I had was one that came to me from somebody who works on the ski hills, one of the ski hills, and a concern there that, I mean, I'm wondering what kind of protocols have been set up for them. Obviously, we want people to still to be able to be outside and connect. That's probably the one place where they can get exercise and get out of the house safely. But with things like lineups and ski tows and just the sheer volume of people that we may have in those facilities, I suspect the same is going to be true of our ice. I mean, I noticed that the Oval was just mobbed the other day. So what kind of what kind of protocols are in place around that? I think having to shut them down would be really unfortunate for all sorts of mental health reasons. But obviously, given the rulings that have come out, there are going to have to be some fairly strict protocols in place for all of that. So where's that at?
I'll see if Jen can speak to the ski hills.
Thank you, Councillor. The ski hills, and as it relates to skating and outdoor rinks, is we will be having extra signage and extra I don't want to use the word security, but extra employees there to kindly reinforce, help people with parking lots before they even get there, and even in other areas on streets where we know it's going to be busy, is just to proactively provide that positive messaging. And also, just to also reinforce that our security will also be able to reinforce any of the mental health supports that are available for people. So we are using GBA Plus and cross training to be able to assess the situation.
Great, good. And I think we sent you on to our office. I think the email that I received about one of the ski hills, so you can have a peek at it and see it specifically. But it was somebody that was working there, and based on their experience was concerned. It was concerned for themselves and also concerned for the people there. So I'd hate to see us have to say no to those kind of things, but it probably is a legitimate concern that needs to be looked at. But we sent you the details on. Great, thank you. That's really it for me. Thank you very much for all the work as always.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I've got two quick questions. The first is, now that we know that there may be a little bit of congestion for outdoor activities, I did have a question yesterday about lighting in dog park amenities and parks and things like that would probably help people to ensure that they're following the rules, staying safe, and being able to utilize these parks at different hours of the day so that everyone's not congregating at the same time. I'm just wondering if we have any thoughts on that, if we're going to be putting in any sort of temporary lighting or anything like that.
Councillor Paquette, I don't believe so at this time, but as I said to Councillor Henderson's questions, I think as we start to kind of understand and appreciate the needs, we can assess that. And that's a good suggestion that the task team can assess in terms of opportunity for temporary lighting.
Yeah, I think the public would be extremely happy about that. I don't think I've heard anyone in the public saying we probably shouldn't do that. In fact, quite the opposite, especially the messages I've gotten from women who would like to be able to get some exercise outdoors after the sun goes down.
Yeah, and we can assess that. We can assess that.
The next question is, we all got a video sent to us from the ATU that showed a really unfortunate interaction between a passenger and a driver. And I know that I was really feeling for the driver. And so obviously people are still under a tremendous stress, and with further restrictions, I'm just wondering how we're going to be approaching transit safety and ridership at this time, because I know that the other major complaint I've been getting is people are frankly uncomfortable taking transit because not everyone is following the rules.
See if Gord's on the call. You can add to that.
So, Councillor, I think we've learned a lot over the course of the year in terms of where some of the problem areas are. So certainly working with our operators, we've tried to provide them with, you know, some guidance on how to deal with those situations and have the supports in place. There's a lot of messaging we've been putting out to the public in general in terms of masks and conduct, but there are still, as you mentioned, those groups where people are maybe not following the rules, and we're trying to address that through, you know, the safety measures we put in for operators as well as the messaging. So it's ongoing monitoring and working with the TPOs and our inspectors to make sure that if there are situations that involve, you know, issues, that our operators have access to the supports to help them through those situations, and also to provide, you know, a level of comfort for the passengers that are on the bus in those uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, and so there are multiple issues that could happen, but of course, the ones that look like they can explode into violence are a concern, but also just the ones where people aren't wearing masks properly is also a concern. So one of the things that we've seen, obviously, like with the more physical interactions, that tends to be fare-based. I'm just a little bit worried about this idea of increasing fares in the middle of a pandemic when we are trying to attract people onto transit. So just some food for thought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Caterina.
Thank you. So, Adam, I think I'd asked this week sometime, but more appropriate now. So we had the December 15th regulations in. Now, these new ones are December 13th, and I guess I need to understand, is this an overlap of what we had? Are some of these things the same, these new restrictions, as what was in place before? Or are these all new to what was there before, or not? So how do we manage understanding that? Have we eliminated some restrictions, or has the province eliminated some restrictions with these new ones? Or have they just added on to what was already there?
So in the case, there's been new ones added, Councillor Caterina, and where there's been a sort of a more restrictive action identified, it would supersede the previous one. And the example for that is places of worship was a third of capacity, and now it's down to 15%. So that would supersede the previous order. And so it's kind of all three of those things that some remain in place, some are superseded, and some are new. What will happen on the 15th is kind of where the province would determine whether they would rescind those previous orders or extend them. Obviously, if they've been superseded, they wouldn't.
Right. Okay, so we still need to see what they're going to do at that on the 15th for those particular ones, because I guess that's the confusion right now for myself and for others, is they're not sure if they are the same, they're different, or which ones they're going to be following. Obviously, the more restrictive ones should be the ones they're following. And with this, part of this mask now is province-wide, no exceptions.
Province-wide.
Are all these new restrictions province-wide, no exception?
Correct.
Or are there still some nope, they're province-wide, no exceptions. Okay, that clarifies that because we're looking at it regionally before. So even that, the December 15th rules were regional. These ones now are province-wide.
Correct.
Okay.
And
all right. That's
and my advice, Councillor Caterina, if you get any questions from citizens, I would encourage you to reiterate the more restrictive ones are the ones that are in place.
That are in place. Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. Thank you very much for that, Adam.
Thank you. Councillor Banga.
Thank you. My first question is about, first of all, thanks to everyone for doing all the extra work and even more than that. And a couple of questions about indoor-outdoor gatherings. I know we are restricting that, or the province is restricting that to 10 in-person attendees. My question is,
Councillor Benga, you're not allowed to have a gathering outside of your household, just to be clear, both indoor and outdoor.
okay, weddings, ceremonies are limited to
There are
10
two exceptions, weddings and funerals.
Oh, okay. So again, questions on that is, the schools are still open and the classes are bigger than 10. How is, are we or the province sending mixed signals?
Well, the junior high, grades 7 to 12, are doing schooling from home. And that's in place. K to 6 are still in school, and that, I believe, goes till December 18th, and then they will be off. My understanding is that the education component, they felt comfortable with the guidelines they had in place, or the measures that are being taken in schools to allow that to continue with K to 6. Does it send confusion? I think there's always going to be these areas that do create a little bit of confusion, and that's where we need to ensure that we're, like we're doing right now, unpacking these restrictions and communicating them as clearly as possible.
Okay. And working from home is mandatory unless employer determines that the employee is physically needed wherever it is. How are we going to, I guess, investigate whether the employer is going to demonstrate or not that the employee is needed at the location?
I think my understanding is that they're developing additional guidance for businesses as it relates to this. That's not in place yet. In terms of our enforcement of that, it's pretty tough. I'm going to suggest that unless it's an obvious area that we see, we're going to have to rely on businesses doing the right thing and making sure that they're taking the necessary steps. And although you know, the data, we've had some challenges with it. You know, that private business hasn't really been highlighted as one area that there's been a transmission, although I will say that there is a gap in sort of unknown cases. But I think for that one, it's really the onus is going to be on the businesses to ensure that they're taking the right steps.
Okay, and again, my next question is about outdoor activities. Sure, we can control or police or at least act on when people are skating or they're at a ski hill. Maybe that can be monitored. But how are we going to do or monitor spaces like ski hills? Tobogganing places, because people tend to get out somewhere and then those are unlimited places. I mean, wherever you see a hill, you start tobogganing.
See if Jen can help with this one.
It would, at this point, be an extension of similar to how we are approaching outdoor rinks, is having, where it's a city facility, is having city employees there to help remind with those social distancing. We also have park rangers who are in the city and who are, also helping people understand the restrictions and reminding when they see compliance or non-compliance. Does that address your question?
Yes, it does, and I did have more questions, but my time's up. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Walters?
Thank you. So the 943 new cases today, is that our highest daily case count at any point? Do we know that?
For the Edmonton area,
Yeah,
sorry,
for the Edmonton area.
I haven't seen that yet, but it certainly sounds like the highest.
Right.
If not close to the highest.
So I guess the thing I'm most concerned about is because the large retail spaces don't shift from 25% capacity of fire code to 15% until Sunday morning.
Correct.
At midnight. I wonder, and Councillor Knack was getting at this a little bit, but the our capacity to enforce, what I worry is sort of a super spreader Saturday sales extravaganza, the rush on the malls, people feeling like this is their last chance to get out and get Christmas shopping done. So our ability to really enforce because the 25% capacity is the rule on Saturday. Right.
So I didn't answer fully on the malls, and Jen has some additional information.
So on the malls, we have, again, working with mall security. We also have our health and safety is in business and shopping centers and malls as well. We have peace officers and bylaw officers who are, although malls aren't open 24/7, there's some coverage there. And then again, it's all about mask. Either it's issuing tickets or issuing warnings. And we've got those numbers that we're tracking, but that would be the mechanism that we would be using to talk about those compliance areas as as they need to put those in place.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so that's sort of the mechanical side of it, and I think the communication side of it then, I think a lot of families are going to see this as, an opportunity to sneak in some, and I worry about that. At 943 cases in the health zone in our region today, and it was on the chart earlier, so I don't know if that's just, that would be the Edmonton health zone. I just worry if we can do any extra communications tomorrow about, COVID's around every corner right now. The virus is around every corner. Just to warn people that it's really risky to go. And it sucks for these businesses. This is a big time of year, but.
Yes, we will.
I don't know. I just raised that to think about because that makes me a bit nervous. I also wondered, Katrin, or Jan, whomever, or Adam, are we monitoring or able to monitor any of the organized resistance to these restrictions? And I know in Calgary there's social media posts about another freedom rally on Saturday. So I think maybe people down there are being a little more obvious and can be subsequently enforced against more explicitly versus, I wonder what kind of organized resistance we're seeing here where people may be doing things like that. Do we monitor that?
Corporate security is great about letting us know when there is planned activity that they become aware of, and so we rely heavily on their intel.
They're supported, or I think police plays a prominent role in this, and I just didn't have time to check, but I don't know if we have police members on the call.
Yes, hello, it's Deputy Chief Kevin Brzezinski, and I have Dean Hilton on the line as well.
So the question is in terms of enforcement related to protests, so to speak?
I guess, Kevin, it's, monitoring where there is people organizing resistance to COVID restrictions and and going out into public in large groups or planning things? Are we able to monitor that and then B, nip it in the bud, or enforce against it if it happens?
Yeah, Dean Hilton here. I'll answer that one there. So, yeah, we've been liaising with Calgary and some of our partners, and we're all in the same boat on this one. Obviously, there's a legal right to protest and all that type of stuff that we have to balance, but the reality is the health orders are in place. So our strategy at this point, we've got police liaisons that reach out and are dealing with all the coordinators of those events. Generally, the coordinators have been pretty good to deal with, but the reality is when we get these events that happen and we get large groups, our members will do an assessment on, again, the ability for us to go in and try and get compliance. If people are complying, that's great. If we fail to get compliance, kind of what the strategy we're looking at right now is to identify the organizers and ticket them if appropriate following the event. And that's so as we don't create a big scene at the time and maybe create a public safety risk by getting engaged with a large group of people at a time when they can, of course, make a big stand. So they're very complex. I know we're all struggling. The sheriffs are engaged in the conversations as well because they deal with the legislature and we support them in that. But right now our biggest strategy is to try again to get that compliance through the education, but we will have teeth through ticketing should that be deemed required as people are non-compliant, or the repeat offenders as you mentioned there.
Thank you. Councillor Essinger?
I'd like to follow that up because that's what I'm hearing from citizens is that we are educating rather than ticketing some of those offenders at the large gatherings. So if I understand it clearly, it's because what could happen if you started ticketing everyone that was in attendance, you could have a bigger problem. Is that my understanding?
Correct. If we were to go into a large group situation and start ticketing, and the group all of a sudden turns against our smaller number of officers, that could create a safety risk. So our goal would be to.
Sorry, we lost you there for the last sentence or so. Can you repeat the last sentence?
I'm sorry. Yeah. So our goal is to not create a risk to our officers. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Not create a risk to our officers or other patrons in the crowd. So we would follow up with ticketing. But again, I think the biggest part here is we are trying to work closely with all the organizers, especially of groups that are continuing to have the weekly rallies. And I hear we've had some progress with the one rally that was happening in Mill Woods there for the last week with the car rallies. I believe they've come around and they're not planning to do the car rally this weekend.
Well, that's great, but and I guess I would encourage to somehow publicize that we're ticketing people because a lot of people are thinking we're not. We're just allowing it to happen. So maybe if we knew that was happening, people would feel more comfort. I don't know. My other question is for Katrin around communications, and I appreciate the variety of social media. Are we supplementing that with other means? We used to have the flashing signs about gatherings near playgrounds, things like that, because not everyone's on social media.
That's an excellent point. We are taking a multimedia approach. Signage in, for example, transit centers and other places, recognizing that not everyone gets their information that way. Signage has been a big part of the strategy throughout.
And I'm wondering if we're communicating, and I'm not sure who this question would be for, there seems to be some more violent reactions in some places when there's a confrontation around the mask. Is there a place people should be calling unless it's life-threatening, you don't want them to call 911? Do we communicate another place they could call?
So as it relates to not adhering to the provincial health orders, it's actually through Alberta Health Services, Alberta Health, It's the information that's on the website, and we can make sure that we share that with each of your offices.
Because I think that's what people are asking. They want to report it. They're a little frustrated or very uncomfortable. I've had people say, I was in the store and I left because people weren't wearing masks, and they were very worried about that. So they don't know what to do with that. Rest of my questions have been asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On enforcement, which is, I think, what I'm hearing the most about right now, is a couple questions. I've just to be clear, certainly our peace officers would not have jurisdiction over at the legislature on the legislature grounds, would they? Or have they been given authority to enforce anywhere, including there? Or would the sheriffs and security on their grounds have? Since that seems to be where it is, the question is, why isn't the city doing something about the gatherings at the legislature? And the jurisdiction's a little fuzzy over there, so.
I'll ask the EPS members to see if they can respond to that.
Certainly, Dean Hilton again. Definitely, we've been in contact with the sheriffs there, and basically they are doing the policing of those grounds. Again, we have an MOU with them. They'll ask us to support it, but the responsibility lies with them. Currently, their mandate, we just had a conference call with them yesterday. Their direction has been, again, to do the education route. Ticketing would be a last resort.
But if they did ask you for help, you would attend?
Absolutely, yes. We do attend when they call, and we monitor their events very closely.
Okay. That's just helpful to be able to answer those questions about what's happening on the ledge grounds. Another question, Mr. Laughlin, I gather Calgary's looking at increasing their fines for their face masking bylaw for non-compliance. How does that relate to the provincial order, which my guess would be that supersedes ours for the most part and is subject to their orders are $1,000 fine, ours are $100 fine. So does that give our enforcement folks a choice of which to issue, or does one trump the other?
See if Ms. Andrzejczyk's on the call here.
They're complementary, and in other circumstances similar to this, we have both, and it allows some discretion on the part of our officers on which path to go. And I think along the lines that we've taken all along, we tried to start with education and the lowest to change the behavior before going to the sort of stronger enforcement steps. And training is provided to all of them to help them with that process that they use.
But $1,000 fine under the provincial rules is now a possibility that our enforcement personnel can administer at their discretion.
Correct.
Okay. So we don't need to make a bylaw change to ratchet the penalty to that. The province has already done that for us.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. The outbreaks at the homeless serving facilities, without getting into the details of it, but I understand additional space for isolation was being activated. Again, with pending facility closures, more of that's available. Are there any constraints or impediments to making sure that there's enough isolation space for folks who should be isolated if positive coming out of one of those sites?
Mr. Mayor, maybe I'll weigh in on that one. It's Rob here. Certainly, we're working with AHS and Community and Social Services in terms of ensuring those individuals do have a place to go. Providing beds for those individuals is becoming more of a challenge, but certainly those conversations are ongoing. The shelters do have isolation spaces within the shelters for people that are showing some signs but have not been confirmed yet. So it is a challenge. We do have potential expansion buildings that we could go into. So we're all on the same page in that regard.
And
but it is something that we're monitoring.
And we will not hesitate to do that if necessary.
Absolutely.
Okay. I would assume nothing anymore in a situation like this, but so it's helpful to just double check. So, Dr. Sikora, Thank you for being on these calls and for the work you and your colleagues are doing. Just one question about sort of expectations. I think some people may be thinking, oh, okay, the counts should start to fall or flatten out now, and hopefully the measures from a couple weeks ago will temper that. But realistically, we're still in for several more weeks, and looking at what's been happening down east, there are echoes of the spread. And if you could comment on what we can expect in the next few weeks.
It's a good question, and we're still quite in the thick of things right now. So lots of COVID that is circulating in and around the community, lots of hospital admissions, lots of visits to medical professionals, lots of ICU visits. We have just had the application of more restrictive policies for our population. It's our hope that should help bend the curve and help level off and ultimately decrease the cases that are being transmitted. That is going to take some time, likely weeks, and ultimately probably months. We will have COVID circulating in around the Alberta and Edmonton context for probably well into the first half and quarter, definitely of 2021. So with the measures, that curve should be bent. We should have, our hope is that we should have those numbers start to come down to a more reasonable level where our contact tracing can be more effective and more efficient, definitely, that our hospital infrastructure can at least regain some semblance of normalcy, and then ultimately our population has fewer cases overall, but it is going to take time.
Thank you. That's helpful, Dr. Sikora. Next up on the second round is Councillor McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Andreychuk, I constantly have had this question about common areas and elevators in apartment buildings. Does with the new rules from the province, the restrictions, do those restrictions reach into private common spaces?
That's a great question, and I'm going to start this and just look to see if I can get a little bit of assistance from Ms. Jacobson here. The orders allow our peace officers to enforce anything that's in the public health order, and so that would impact whether or not social gatherings are occurring in a private space. We would still look at the social distancing, the mask requirements, and the gatherings, indoors or outdoors. So in a sense, it does go into a bit of private space. Having said that, we would probably want to be cautious and careful how we proceed in those as well.
Well, I think it's the individual living in a building with elevators and stuff, and they get on the elevator and the other person isn't wearing a mask and they feel completely helpless. And I think they're looking for somebody to reach in and solve that problem for them, and it's really difficult, I think. But maybe I'll follow up with you offline to see if there is any specific answers we could give those folks. They may be able to post notices inside their buildings, at least, that it's now required, maybe, if it's required.
I think Ms. Jacobson may have a bit of a supplement as well to add.
Hi, Councillor McKean. Yes, the interpretation we've gotten from Alberta Health is that it's their intention that this order province-wide regarding masks would apply within common areas of buildings. I do hope to see some of those posters and messaging to follow that up, but that is the intention, is that it will apply.
If there is a way to let us know if there's any opportunity for people to get a hold of posters they could put up in their buildings, that'd be great. But I'll follow up with you on that. I have a couple more things I wanted to hit. Mr. Seabrook, we've had a few emails about people asking why transit drivers aren't wearing masks during the operation of a bus. I don't know that to be true. Is that the case, and is there any policy on bus drivers wearing masks?
Sorry, Councillor, could you just repeat that last part of the bus driver question?
Yeah, so again, emails coming in asking why bus drivers aren't role modeling the wearing of masks on the bus. So the suggestion is that the bus driver is not wearing a mask, people wanting to know why that isn't happening. I don't know if that's the case or if it's a rare case. I don't know what the policy is. Can you let us know?
Sure. So, Councillor, as long as they've been in behind the shield, we haven't made it mandatory. We have, in the past, allowed bus drivers to not wear a mask as long as they were in the confines of the secured area. Once they left the shielded area, they were required to put on the mask. But given the new orders, what we've started to do, and it just recently, is message to the drivers to wear their masks on a regular basis, and we're encouraging them to do that. But again, the mandatory piece before was as soon as they left the shielded area, they were required to put the mask on.
Thank you. Last question, Mr. Laughlin, and this is a tricky one. I had an email from a woman with a very sort of tragic story about a history of sexual violence and trauma and panic when she put on a mask. Got an exemption card from her doctor, has gone out in public and of course faced a backlash, which I kind of understand why people are afraid of others in confined spaces not wearing masks. Have we done any communications around this? Are there any systems that you know of that could help somebody like that? It seems to be the best way for a person like that would be, curbside delivery, that sort of thing. But any thoughts on all that?
That's what we've been messaging to the BIAs and the other retail and grocery, is to ensure that they provide that option for those folks that do have legitimate exemptions to the mask, the mandatory mask requirement. So our folks have been trying to make sure that that's something that those businesses consider to support those that do have an exemption.
Okay. Thank you. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The last set of questions just relates to, and Councillor Henderson was talking about more and more people being outside, especially now. Are we looking at so on all of our active pathways, there's a lot of sidewalks and multi-use trails in particular that we don't clear during the winter. There are many that are required to be cleared within 48 hours, but from what I understand, there's an inventory that we normally wouldn't. Are we considering maybe doing something differently this winter to allow people to more safely navigate their communities by foot? We have a team of about 200, I think, for active pathways. Are they able to go out and do some of that additional inventory?
Councillor, I think, as Mr. Laughlin alluded to earlier, it's very early in sort of the process, but we are looking at what other options are available for mobility. Again, looking at some of the things we did in the summer, but certainly areas where we can do some additional snow and ice control on the active pathways, we would look at how we could action that. And given the state of the weather right now, we do have some capacity given that the weather has been favorable. So that would be something we would look to.
And that's what I was wondering, less so a creation of a new space, although, if there's an opportunity with working with what Councillor Henderson talked about, but more looking at parks, multi-use trails, and seeing if we can just really drive up that clearing, because talking to a lot of folks who are trying to walk through their communities or walk through their local parks, and there's pathways that aren't required to be cleared. So I just wanted to flag that. The second piece to that snow clearing question is, and I don't want to get into a snow clearing debate, but when we go and clear in a residential community the alleys for the garbage trucks, there's still a big gap that exists between the two properties and then the alley. And now that a lot of folks are trying to walk through their communities, if somebody's using a mobility aid, if they're in a wheelchair, walking across that alley, which is not being cleared of snow, is very unsafe for a lot of those individuals. And, you know, we've been copied on some tweets from folks who are dealing with those type of challenges. And is there an opportunity to think about that, particularly this winter, although I would hope we can maybe think about it in future winters, to really look at those alley connections that are not the responsibility of the homeowners, for us to clear it?
Councillor, we can certainly take that away. I know we've been trying to evolve the program in terms of how it supports active pathways and the vulnerable population. So, you know, this winter is a learning year for us for snow. So I think that's an opportunity we can certainly examine and see where we can make some impacts to make it easier for people.
Yeah, I think if you want some good examples, I've got some folks who have sent over some challenges that they've run into, which are frankly yearly challenges we've had for decades in this city. But my understanding with the updates is that we were hoping to maybe tackle those in a different way. So I'll send some things your way, and maybe we can see if there's some opportunities to better help address that.
Certainly, if you have some locations, send them through and we'll have a look at those.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are all my questions. Sorry, last question. Recognizing the decision to not allow walking on Candy Cane Lane ultimately came from the provincial government, and I appreciate that. There's still, and I heard, and we've already, I think, put up some signage now on it to discourage people from walking. We do provide typically an enhanced level of clearing on the roads and actually the sidewalks. While we want to discourage people from using sidewalks, people are still likely going to use it during the daytime, people that live on the block, things like that. There might still be some who don't realize these restrictions are in place, and I just wanted to double check that we're not going to forget that standard that we usually apply to that particular stretch this year, even with the changing circumstances.
Correct. We are still maintaining the level of snow and ice control on Candy Cane Lane that we would on any other year.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Banga?
Thank you. Dr. Skora, you're probably still on the call. Question for you. I know you had 3 data points provided, November 12th, November 25th, and December 10th. I'm pretty sure you have the data from before too. So if you were to analyze this data, would you say that it is trending upwards in a linear fashion or exponential fashion?
Certainly over the last month or so, it has been somewhat exponential, and it will remain to be seen what the effect of those interventions are, those restrictions are, to see if we can actually start changing that to something that hopefully will first plateau, and then ultimately we have hopes that it should start to come down, but it will take time.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Hilton, that car rally in Millwards, could you comment on any notable incidents that took place there, issues?
Well, I can say there, Councillor, the feedback I got is the organizers there were very good to deal with. They were advised of the mandatory need for masking. They had hand sanitizer and everything on board, but the reality of the fact is, I think what we saw there is it got a little bigger than they were able to manage. So again, we were able to have conversations with the organizers there, and they were very agreeable and compliant. They understand the risks, and from what I heard today, I think they agreed they wouldn't have the event this weekend. So again, I think people are trying to make a statement and whatnot. They're trying to do it in a respectful way. Of course, that's going to require large gatherings of people, and I think some of the events we've been dealing with, people have been spacing out as much as they can, and they're wearing masks. So again, balance of people's right to protest respectfully and the public interest, obviously, the health order that we're trying to balance here as well.
Thank you. And my next question is there any way that area councilors can assist you with the messaging from police?
That's a great question. I don't know. We're looking like we're working with the other agencies across Alberta here on trying to come up with a strategy that makes sense to us all. Obviously, we're talking to the Crown that's been assigned to deal with all the public health ticketing as well. And that takes into interest again of public interest and capacity of the courts to deal with all the ticketing and all that. So we have to be mindful of all that. So that's where again we look at building some kind of a message here going forward. And right now it's really educate, but we will ticket where we deem there is a lack of compliance or we deal with those repeat offenders.
I think just to echo Dean's comments, I think once we do get a consistent corporate message across the province, I think we can share that with the councils as well.
Yeah, and you guys were breaking up, but I guess I got the gist of it. Ms. Owen, it's the same question for you. How could we assist?
I think based on this conversation and what's upon us over the season, we're going to furnish your offices with more connected neighbor messages that are about compliance restrictions and the need to keep the long game in mind. So any distribution of those messages, as you have been with others in the past, would be most welcome. We will make sure that you have that available to you.
Well, that's great. And the final question for Mr. Sibrick is, just for curiosity's sake, transit buses, if somebody is behaving inappropriately on the buses, is there any expectation on the driver to defuse that situation? Or they just stop the bus and wait for transit police officers or police officers to show up there?
Councillor, we instruct the drivers to not get into confrontational situations. If there is a situation where there's some verbal dialogue going back and forth, they've got training in terms of trying to diffuse a difficult situation, but their instruction is to contact control for assistance, whether that be an inspector, TPO, or even escalation to EPS.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Someone want to move receipt of information?
I will, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I got Councillor Walters here in the room first. So I just have one more, which is that all of the things being equal, we would not have an EAC again for some time.
The next one is on April 7th, I believe.
That might be a little far out. I'm not going to suggest that we try to schedule something today, but I think we should look at the calendar tomorrow at council and perhaps take the question overnight of when would be most appropriate for us to convene again. At minimum January, but we may wish to receive information between now and then. Also recognizing we can call one of these at a moment's notice if necessary. So I'm going to just commit to take that offline with Mr. Laughlin and the clerks between now and tomorrow, and at minimum sometime in January, and in consultation with folks. I guess none of us are going anywhere, so but mindful that we all need a break as well. So I'll take that offline, and we'll have a quick discussion about that tomorrow as a tidy up. So just to flag that. We'll maybe test a few options with your offices between now and then. Leave it there. please vote on, if there's nobody else, please vote on receipt of information.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And we are still waiting on Councillor
Yes.
Caterina. Thank you. Councillor Esslinger.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Yep.
And Councillor McKean.
Denny, you were doing so well.
I know. It always happens at the last vote, doesn't it?
I'm a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Display the vote. Carried. Okay. That's all for EAC today. Thank you all very much. We'll see you back at council tomorrow to conclude the budget and a handful of other tidy ups. We should be done by noon is my prediction. Thank you.